Hi everybody, and welcome to our chat with Penny Batchelor. I'm just going to hand her over to her now and let her introduce herself a little bit better than I will.
Thank you, Caroline. Yes, and thanks ever so much for having me. And hello, everybody out there. I'm told that there are people in Australia watching as well. So hello to everybody down under. Yes, it was wonderful to be here and share the story of my debut novel, which is a domestic noir thriller. And I didn't even know that that category existed until my publisher said that that's what it was, because I thought it was a psychological thriller. But apparently, books that are based around the home and family dramas and secrets, which is what mine is called a domestic noir thriller. Here's the book. I've got it in front of me, so I'll just try and get it in front of the camera. There we go. It's called My Perfect Sister. It was published in June and it's available in ebook form and paperback from all good retailers. And there are signed copies available from Fox Lane Books and Kenilworth Books online. So that's my little sales patch, sales spiel. I'll get that out of the way and now let's have a good chat. And I'm looking forward to answering your questions.
Great, well, we'll start off with a question from one of our members who's called Jennifer Price. She said that she thinks it's very brave that you tried to get published in lockdown. And she wondered how long you had started writing your book before publication.
Oh, thanks, Jennifer, and hi if you're watching. Well, the thing with publishing is that the time scales are so long that you might have a book accepted. My book was accepted last August and it was due to be published in May. And of course, in August, we knew nothing about coronavirus. It would be science fiction, really. If I wrote it in a novel, you probably say that's far too far-fetched. And so we didn't have much choice, really. I planned a really nice party in May at a local bookshop, which had to be shelved, and I did a Facebook Live launch instead. So it's not ideal joining publishing during lockdown, but it's a brilliant thrill to actually be published. So I can't complain. To answer your question about how long it took, I did a Faber Academy online course in 2015, which was 6 months online, and it was called Writing a Novel, the first 15,000 words. I've known all my life that I wanted to write. I did the really ridiculous mistake of everybody who says they want to be a writer, which is not actually get down to writing anything, because writing plots and a few paragraphs here and there and an opening chapter, it doesn't really count. You've got to get your book finished if you want to see it published. But I was lacking a bit in confidence, so I wondered about maybe either doing a master's course or some sort of online course. But master's courses are very expensive, great for those who do them, but it was sort of out of my price range, really, and my time range. So I didn't need an academic qualification. So I found out about this Faber course, and it was marketed as all the bits you need to know about writing without the academic stuff. And it was fantastic. I really recommend it. The tutor, called Tom Bromley, was very supportive. We had a lovely group of people from around the world. And I'm still in touch with some of them. We're sort of very supportive with each other, reading each other's work. And whilst there was sort of constructive criticism there, the way it was done and pitched was very encouraging, rather than just sort of leaving you with your head in your hands thinking, I can't do this anymore. So I did the course, and then I had 15,000 words there. Then I probably took about another 2 or 3 years to actually finish the book. I then paid Faber Academy to have a reader's report because I really liked my story, but I just knew in my gut something wasn't quite right, but I didn't know how to fix it. And this report was, again, very encouraging, but he nailed what I needed to do, really. And I thought, oh, yes, what a brilliant idea. So I then made sure that it was all spell checked. I'd done the best work that I could and sent it to agents. had some positive feedback. Some people didn't even bother replying, as is every writer will have discovered that happens sometimes. And then I decided, well, to take up some advice from my local bookshop at Kenilworth Books, which was to try and submit to some indie publishing houses that don't require you to have an agent, I mean. And I did that to Red Books, and the next day after emailing, they got back to me, said, can you send me the whole manuscript, please? Because I'd sent the first 3 chapters, and then I had a couple of weeks where I was so nervous, sitting waiting to hear what they were going to say, and I was sure they were going to say thanks, but no thanks. It turned out that the publisher was actually on holiday, but when she did get back to me, it was a thumbs up, so that was an amazing feeling, and that was last August. So, as I said, timescales are long in publishing. So May and June, the ebook came out in May and the paperback in June.
There's a question on the stream from somebody called Penny Batchelor. It's showing up as Facebook user, where you might see it. It says, do you have any plans for a second book?
I'll let you into a secret. That's my brother.
I wonder if he was a relation.
It's funny because on my Facebook page he's down as my top fan. So
Oh, Penny's frozen. See if I can unfreeze her.
Hello, can you see me now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I've got you back.
Good. Where did I freeze at? I don't want to repeat myself.
Just where you said that he was on your Facebook page as your top fan.
He was, yes. And I do have plans for a second book. I've got 2 on the go, actually. One is another psychological thriller, domestic noir thriller. The publisher recommended that my next book is in the same genre. The people who've read the first, they will be expecting something along the same lines. And then I do have another book which is quite close to my heart on the go, and it's more literary fiction, and it's based on some of my childhood experiences in hospital, but it's more sort of heartwarming, quite funny, and yeah, so I'm keeping going on that one as well. I've got 2 on the go, writing on each depending what kind of mood I'm in, that kind of the time of the day.
So we've got another really interesting question that's just come in from, so again, it's not showing their name and I don't know why, because it's from my friend called Andy Hargreaves. Hi, Andy. And he says, what input for the design of the book jacket do you have, as it's an important aspect of the vision overall?
Well, I'm really fortunate because I've heard from some authors that I've sort of met on Twitter that in some publishing houses you don't get a say. You're just told this is what it is, and if you don't quite like it, then, well, tough really. But Red Door were really good. They asked me what my vision was, and they took it to a professional designer who came back with a few concepts, all of which were good. But the one that I've got, which is, for those of you who haven't seen the book, it's the cutout woman with scissors. And the idea that my perfect sister is that the heroine Annie is actually quite jealous of her sister, because when Annie was 5, her 16-year-old sister went missing and was never found, presumed dead, and this just overshadowed Annie's childhood. So she feels quite resentful because she can't really remember this sister. And I think the cover, here we go again, it shows that menace. I like it. So it turned out, thankfully, that the Red Door team and me, we both liked the same one, and then I got to choose the colour, the blue. There was a pink one, but I thought, well, pink, it makes it sound like it's going to be some sort of rom-com, which it isn't. So if you're wanting something cozy set in a flower shop and a romance at the end, that this isn't your kind of book. But then I suppose if you were wanting that, you wouldn't be in the UK crime book group, would you? Really? Yeah, so I'm really happy with the cover.
There's another question that's come in from, I think it says Anil Kumar. So, did you base any of your characters on someone you know?
No, I didn't. I wouldn't dare, really. Although I do have a friend who is sort of inspiring a character in a second thriller that I'm writing. So no, nobody is anybody I actually, none of the characters are anybody I know. Although I suppose when you're a writer, you probably subconsciously pick up on things you've seen or things people have said. So there might be in there something, that I've heard somebody else saying, or a sort of a warm the character in there, Auntie Lena. She's very loosely based on my mum's best friend who sadly isn't with us anymore. But it's not her, but it's that kind of idea of a warm, loving, pseudo auntie figure.
You do have some interesting characters in the novel, though, isn't there? And there are reasons for some of them. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about it's Ian, isn't it? That's quite an interesting character in your book.
Yes, there's a story behind this as well. I was born with a rare physical disability called osteogenesis imperfecta, which is probably more commonly known as brittle bones, but I don't tend to say that often because people get it a bit confused with the sort of brittle bones that people can acquire when they're in old age. And when I was growing up, I never saw anybody like me on the telly or in fiction, unless it was Children in Need charity appeal or something like that. Figures that were quite tragic and that you were there to pity, or figures, think of something like Annie, no, not Annie, Heidi, that's it. I knew it was a girl's name. And The Secret Garden, where there's a wheelchair user who miraculously, suddenly, they try hard enough and they can walk. Hurrah! Well, no, that didn't happen to me, no matter how hard I tried. And therefore, I just think it's really important to have positive disability representation. It's getting a lot better in children's fiction, although there's still a long way to go. But in adult fiction, you still tend to get that sort of the misery memoir, how awful it is to have this impairment, which it's not the case for many people at all. Or you get the triumph over tragedy, people who perhaps climb Mount Everest with false legs on or something. Brilliant for them if they want to do it, but most of us who are disabled are just ordinary. We're just living our ordinary lives. As we're friends, we're lovers, we're colleagues, we're neighbours, and I just wanted to have that represented in fiction, where the storyline isn't the disability; they just happen to have it. And so with Ian, he's a really interesting character. He is an old friend, an old school friend of Annie's. And when Annie decides that she's going to start looking into the disappearance of her sister Gemma, after the police have closed the case, she gets in touch with him because he's a solicitor. So his story is what he can do for Annie. And yeah, that's it really. So he's a good character. And I also love the character Pretty, Priti, who is Annie's best friend. And I didn't have anyone particularly in mind when I wrote her. I just sort of created the best friend that I'd love to have. So sort of mingled all the lovely bits of the best friends I do have. She's very funny, quite frank and down to earth, loves a glass of wine, always has Annie's back. And yeah, she's lovely. I'd love to see who would play her actually in a film. I think that would be really interesting casting.
Have you got any ideas of who you would cast?
Well, no, somebody asked that when I did my Facebook Live launch. And for Annie, the only person I could think of, unfortunately, is dead. I was thinking of Charlotte Coleman, who was in Four Weddings and a Funeral. She was Hugh Grant's best mate in there. She's quite quirky. She's redhead, sort of not conventionally sort of female, feminine, sort of. And yeah, I imagined her. So I think if somebody, and please do buy the film rights, somebody out there, Steven Spielberg or Reese Witherspoon, if you're watching. I think it'd probably be best to get somebody new. So when you're watching, or not very well known, so when you're watching it, you're not thinking, this is Julia Roberts pretending to be somebody from Yorkshire. It's somebody who really makes that character their own.
What inspired the storyline for The Perfect Sister?
Again, that's another really interesting question, and it was so long ago, Caroline, that I can't really remember when I actually had that initial light bulb moment. But I do remember that I was thinking sort of, well, what if somebody didn't behave in the way that you would expect them to? So when a family member is missing, you would automatically expect everybody to be grieving. And I found Annie an interesting character because she was the opposite. She was angry and very sort of defensive, really. And it sort of went on from there. So I had a vague outline when I started writing it, but I think the magic of fiction is that it sort of marinades in your imagination. And I often find that just when I've got into bed and I've turned off the light, that's when my mind's just sort of wandering a bit. That's when all these ideas come up and you're thinking, but this character could come in, or what if so and so did that instead? And that's what happened with My Perfect Sister. It sort of evolved, lots of rewrites, lots of experimentation. One of the things that first things that they taught on the Faber course was to work out whether you wanted to write in first person or third person. And so the first chapter I wrote in both to see which gripped me most and gripped the other students on the course. And it was certainly writing in that first person because you're in Annie's head directly. You're not hearing a narrator's voice.
So Sam, one of our admins, who's the other half of the main author chat team and Fabulous, asked, has it been difficult publicising your book during lockdown?
Yes, it has, Sam. It really has. Particularly so because I'm shielding. So I'm an author who hasn't seen my book in a bookshop, although thankfully I've been sent some shelfies, I think they're called, sort of a version of selfie of my book in bookshops, which is really nice to see it out there, so I can actually believe that it is for sale, really, and it's not just some weird figment of my imagination. I've not gone to eat crackers during lockdown and had this huge sort of strange dream. So yes, it was as I said earlier on, my launch was cancelled. And it's also, I found it a little bit more difficult as well because my publisher, Fabulous Publishers, they're small indie publishers, and I've learnt so much about the publishing industry since I became an author, because I just naively thought that bookshops, your big chains, would take books from anywhere. But I learnt that there are central buyers for your Tesco's, your Waterstones, Sainsbury's, things like that, and they tend to exclusively deal with the main 6 publishers because the publishers have got the bank balances, the power, the might, the marketing and publicity teams, and the ability to offer pretty big discounts. So I didn't know that publishers will pay to be book choice of the month or in the 3 for 2 offer. So I'm not saying that the books that they choose aren't good, because they're brilliant, but it helps if your publisher has got the might to be able to get it seen. So it's been down to me, really, and the lovely marketing manager at Red Door to try and get in touch with indie bookshops, encourage them to stock my book. And I've also got quite a lot of signed book plates that I've been offering to indie bookshops. So if you own one or work in one, get in touch with me and I can send you some book plates out. I've also been sort of quite active on Twitter, and thank you very much to you and your team, because events like this really help just getting the message out. Because if people haven't heard that the book is available, they haven't got the chance to buy it, have they?
I was going to say, as a debut author as well, because people haven't already read something by you before, it must be even harder to get your name out there.
It is. It's strange, because when you're trying to get your book out, it seems like such an unattainable goal. So when you get published, it's wonderful, fabulous, but it is the first step on the ladder, because you realise then how many other people are in the market, and you're not just competing with your Claire McIntoshes, your Ruth Wares, the really big name people, but all the other debut authors as well. And everybody I've found to be really supportive in the author community. But as you say, you've got to get your name known, and if nobody's heard about you, can I just say, I just had a countdown on the screen. Does that mean?
I saw that as well. I don't know what happened there. I think we're still live.
Oh, good.
Unless anyone tells me any different, let's hope we're still there.
Yeah. So yes, it really does help, and I've built a website which is a little bit hodgepodge, but it's pennybatchelor.co.uk, and I'm going to be setting up an author newsletter. So if you want to go there and sign up, I shall be sending out a newsletter in the next couple of months when I have some news. But there is a competition that somebody who, at random, going to pick one person who's subscribed to win a signed copy of My Perfect Sister. So if you would like to find out and be one of the first to know when book 2 comes out, which I haven't got a title for yet, but you'll be the first to know when I do, then please do sign up.
Well, if you pop a link to your website into the group after this chat, everyone will be able to do that. We are still there. Thanks, Lucy, for letting us know. I've also got a question on the stream from Jason Kelly. He said, what did you do before writing?
What did I do before? Well, when I graduated from university, I worked for the BBC for quite a few years. I started off in their disability programmes unit as a researcher. Then I went to work on a few other programmes.
There we go, we're back again.
Hello, sorry about that. Gremlins got into the internet. And unfortunately, all the questions that were on the right side of my screen have gone as well. What were we talking about, Caroline? Can you just remind me, please?
I've lost my train of thought now we were there. What you did before you were writing, and
got it in one. Yes, I was telling you that I worked on Crime Watch, and then I moved into websites because the BBC were just starting then building their online presence, and then I worked my way up to be a content producer. Then I made redundant. It moved to be a website editor for various educational institutions, ended up at Warwick University. And then unfortunately, because of my condition, my health went down the Swanee, and I had to give up work. So I couldn't sort of really manage working in an office anymore. So I've been doing a bit of freelance journalism. That's another string to my bow. And it's a dream, really, to be able to add the title of author now to my list of jobs.
Did you did you do your degree in journalism?
No, I did it in English and European literature. But when I've been doing the various jobs that I've done, it's included things like interviewing and writing journalistic type pieces. So it was a good training ground, really, to end up being a journalist, mainly for websites and a few magazines.
So, and you're still doing that now? Yeah, we've got
on the side.
Back on the side.
Go good. Yes, we've got the questions back.
So Samantha also asked, she said, did you conduct much research for your book? And if so, did you find out anything that surprised you?
I didn't do a great deal of research, Samantha, because it's set in the present day, and I deliberately didn't set Annie's town somewhere recognisable. I wanted to leave it as a Yorkshire town, so it wasn't a particular landscape that I could get wrong. Basically, I thought I'd leave it up to the reader's imagination. One thing I did research was cancer treatment, and an ex-colleague of mine, she unfortunately had cancer at a very young age. I think she was in her 30s. She sort of told me a lot about the emotional aspects of it and the practical aspects of it and what it was like going for treatment, which I've included a little bit in the book. There's that Annie finds out that there's sort of perks, if you can call it that, but that sounds very crass, for some people who have a certain cancer, because there's more money and funding there than there is for other types of cancer. So that's something that I found quite eye-opening. But apart from that, no, I didn't do a great deal of research.
Fair enough.
Out of my head.
I'd like to go back to what you were saying earlier, because you said you were working on your second book, but you also had something else in mind that you'd maybe based a bit on your childhood experience.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to say too much because it might change. I've done 25,000 words. And as I know from my experience of writing My Perfect Sister, things can change a lot when you suddenly think, oh no, it would be better if this happens later, or bring in another character. But when I was a child, I spent a lot of time in Doncaster Royal Infirmary, and back then they called it the Nightingale Wing. They were hospital wards which went along the system that Florence Nightingale, that famous nurse, invented. So very long, thin wards with bedside aside. And so I spent a lot of time there recovering from fractures. And so without sort of giving too much away, the novel is centered around a girl called Lee, who is Eleanor, but she's a tomboy, so she wants to be called Lee. And I'd just like to say, it's not based on my family or my situation whatsoever. That's all fiction, but it is inspired by some of the things that I went through in hospital. So the practical stuff is true. So when Lee fractures her femur, she goes into hospital. And she disobeyed her mum because her mum had told her to sit down, and she wanted to change the channels on the telly. So she gets up, falls, breaks her leg, goes into hospital. And then the next day, her mum leaves her dad. So there's a lot going on about family tensions, what's going on in the background. And Lee has quite an unusual family setup, which is one of the themes of the book. But it sounds really depressing, doesn't it, when I put it that way? But it's not. It's funny. It's heartwarming. It's sort of a family drama that we shall see if it comes good in the end. I'll sort of see the ending when I get to it. But that's something that I'm really looking forward to finishing.
There's another question from Paul. He said, did you set out to have a particular number of chapters, or did you make the book just as long as it needed to be?
Just as long as it needed to be. I mean, all of these authors that have all these big spreadsheets and things on the wall and have plotted out every chapter before they start writing, I just couldn't do that. And nor could I be somebody like Philip Pullman, who I saw in a talk a few weeks ago online, who said he gets sort of an idea. He starts the first sentence and then it just comes from there. I couldn't do that either. I need to sort of know what my middle and ending are going to be, and then I sort of fill in the gaps. So I like to keep my chapters quite short and keep people, because I love it personally as a reader, when you get to the end of one chapter, you're there in bed and think, oh, just one more, I've got to find out what happens next, because there's a bit of a cliffhanger. And the only other thing I'd say to that is novels have to be about 70,000 words and over. So it obviously has to be that long.
Jennifer Price said, did you write as a child?
I did. Yes, I used to write lots of stories and poetry, and I was quite obsessed with comics when I was a child. And women of a certain age can probably remember things like Bunty and Mandy and Beano and stuff like that. And I used to spend a lot of time making things like that and writing short stories. I have actually got a story that I started. I must have been about 9 or 10, and I got a few chapters in and then gave up. So then I did keep writing, and then in my 20s I did start a couple of novels, and I found them a few years ago and ripped them off, put them in the recycling because I read it and it was just so embarrassing, because I thought I never want anybody to find these and read them, because I hadn't found my own voice yet. I was really obviously sort of copying the rom-coms that I loved to read at the time. So it's only really now, particularly since I've done the course and I've got older, read a lot more books as well, that I've managed to find my own voice and be pretty pleased with what I end up writing once it's been edited. And I've gone over it quite a few times, because as every writer will know, the first bit that you put down on the paper is always pretty rubbish, and you've got to really keep going and tidying it up until you're happy with it.
So based on what you just said about the Beano, I'm going to ask you one of my favourite questions that I like to put on the author chats, which is, would you ever make a graphic novel version of your book?
Well, I can't draw, so, well, I'm a stick man level. Do you mean that would I actually do the artwork myself, or
No,
would I employ an artist?
Yeah, if you could find an artist, would you produce one?
That would be great. I'd love to do that. And I was playing a game on my phone as well, one of these ones where there's a storyline as well as just the sort of shoot 'em up type thing. I'd love to do that as well. Come up with all these ideas, and other books I loved when I was a child and a teenager were the choose your own adventures ones, where there were so many different endings and ways you could go. I'd like to do that as well. But the problem is, Caroline, is that so little time, so many ideas. Really, so you've got to really focus on one thing and get that done. And write that. So I'm always writing down ideas I have for other things. I don't think I'm ever going to finish a book and think, I don't know what to write next, because there's a massive queue.
So Samantha asked before we went live, have you got any advice for members who are working on their debut novel? Especially because you've just kind of fresh from that.
I suppose it's the usual stuff that you get told. So just keep going. Don't give up. It's very easy to get disenchanted, disheartened, particularly if you submit and you get rejections. But keep going, keep rewriting. I've also heard that quite a few novelists, the first novel they write isn't the one that they get published, but it's fantastic for practice, because every bit that you write, you're learning something. I also think that to be a good writer, you need to be a good reader as well. So you need to know your genre, and people in this group will obviously know the crime genre pretty well. You've got to know that you're not just following stereotypes, and you're not writing an idea that somebody published last year that's really similar. And also another piece of advice I think is find some trusted readers. If you're not in a creative writing group, go online, try and find, ask other people in this group if they'd be happy to read your novel. It's not a good idea to get your mum or your best friend to do it, because they're always going to tell you you're wonderful. So find somebody that can give you some honest feedback, but will do so in a constructive manner, and who might say, well, I'm not particularly gripped with the opening chapter, but I really love your idea, so maybe you want to get straight in the action, something like that. And that really helps. And if you reciprocate with them, it also really helps as well, learning about how other people write and learning to read quite critically, so you can work out what readers might be wanting from your writing. I hope that helps.
I think that was really good advice. Lucy, one of our admins, who's been really good and repinned our thread, now we've had to go back live, says, what do you enjoy reading for pleasure?
Well, it tends to change a lot. Like I said, in my 20s, I read loads of rom-coms, and then I just got rom-commed out. And now it's the genre that I write in, really. I love psychological thrillers. I also like historical fiction. I love the sort of gothic thrillers, like is it Laura Purcell, people like that. Claire McIntosh, Ruth Ware, they're fantastic. And then sometimes when I'm writing, I don't actually want to read other people's work then, because I don't want to get influenced by the way they are writing. And so I might read some non-fiction, like I'm reading Greg Jenner's Dead Famous at the moment. It's a history of celebrity, and it's funny. And because it's in short chapters, it's great to read at night, because you can read one chapter and you don't have to remember the next night what happened, because he's talking about somebody else.
And Jennifer Price, you might have touched on this, but Jennifer Price said, who's your favourite author?
Well, again, that's a really difficult question, because I'm not the sort of person who tends to read things again. I know some people might have a book that they've read 10 times and they sort of go back to for comfort. That's not me. But in terms of authors that I really like to follow, there's certainly Ruth Ware, Sarah Waters. I think she's brilliant. And again, a cliche, but I mean, Jane Austen, she's fantastic. Studied her at A-level, and I feel quite sad that I've read all the books now, and there's never going to be another one unless somebody discovers something in a dusty old chest somewhere, and the lost manuscript of Jane Austen. Wouldn't that be marvellous? And I think they'd probably make a fortune as well.
Yeah, they would. Samantha has asked this, and I think it's probably interesting for you, especially without your first novel being out. It's her favourite author chat question. She says, what's your most memorable moment so far since you started writing?
Oh, I think it's got to be when I actually held my paperback in my hand. The ebook was published in May, but I still felt like a bit of a cheat, because due to delays with coronavirus, the paperback hadn't been printed yet. So I'm an author, but I've not been in the bookshop and I've not seen my book. Can I really be called an author? But when the book arrived in the post, and there it was amazing to think this story that came out of my head is there in a proper book. And as I said earlier on, I'm really pleased with the artwork and all the work that Red Door team put into it. I don't think I'll ever forget that. Fantastic feeling.
We've got some really interesting questions coming in on the stream.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Paul says, if you had to do a non-fiction book, what would it be about?
Nothing about brothers. I wouldn't dare. He's bigger than me. Probably something about history. I'm really into Victorian history. I think it would be really good to do a biography and find a sort of lesser known figure, particularly a woman, I think, who's had a very interesting life but hasn't been had the recognition that she deserved, because often it's been men who've written the history and women's stories have been hidden. So I think I'd really like to do that. I also started a travel book in my early 30s, because I have been very fortunate to have visited a lot of places, and I used to do some travel journalism for a couple of disability website and a disability magazine. I don't know how I'd sort of pitch that, because people wouldn't really want to read where I've been on my holidays, but maybe some sort of discussion about how the travel industry has changed in the past sort of 20, 30 years and how it will do in the future. But one thing I would never write is an autobiography, because I think my life's quite dull. I don't think anyone would want to read it. So I'd much rather write a biography of somebody else that's done lots of exciting things.
You wouldn't write a book about disability, and just because you're so passionate about showing like a positive.
I am. I think there's lots of fantastic people out there who could do it a lot better than me. Say, for example, there's a woman called Samantha Renker who you might have seen on the telly. She's got the same disability as me. She's got beautiful long blonde hair, very glamorous, and she tends to be on sort of morning talk shows, and she was on an antique show as well, primetime telly a while ago. She's a prominent disability campaigner. So yeah, I think there are other people that could do it better than me, and my skills are more campaigning for disability representation in fiction rather than disability rights in the whole. Although of course I support that, I don't think I'm particularly politically minded, and I would prefer to support other people who are championing that rather than do it myself. It takes a bit of time to do the writing anyway.
We've got some questions from Tamsin Rosewell.
Oh, hi Tamsin.
She said, if you overheard a bookseller talking about your book to a customer, what would you like to hear them say?
Well, I hope it wouldn't be, don't buy that, it's a load of rubbish, love, save your
I'd
money.
imagine buy it would be a nice thing to hear them say.
Yeah. Oh no, it would be wonderful. Well, Tamsin is actually a bookseller in my local shop, so it would be wonderful if she said, "You've read it here now." She's gonna be big, being there at the beginning. I think that would be marvelous.
There you go, Tamsin. You know what to say.
Yeah. Give me up, please, Tamsin.
She also said you've been a BBC content producer in the past. Did your time writing for them inspire any of the story contents for My Perfect Sister? That's a really good question, Tamsin.
It is. No, is the answer though. Not really. I was doing educational stuff when I was there. It was mainly travel and education. I could write a lot about the media industry if I ever set a novel in there. I think that would be a really good idea for the future. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the comedy W1A on the telly, which was a spoof of the BBC, but I'm telling you from what I experienced, it's more documentary and not a spoof. It really is like that, and there are people like that there. But yeah, good question. Thank you, Tamsin.
And Paul said, if you overheard someone talking about your book, would you own up to being the author?
If they said it, oh, it's wonderful. Yeah, fantastic. I'd say, oh, well, do you know what it's happened to? It just happens to be me. Can I sign your copy? But if it was negative, I'd probably just slink off and have a little cry somewhere. Yeah, but then it's not me.
Do you read your reviews?
I've heard that a lot of writers don't. I have looked on Amazon to see how many reviews that I've got, and can I just say again, it's a plug for myself, so apologies for that. But if you have read my book and you do like it, if you could review it on Amazon and Goodreads, that would be excellent. Thank you, because it's something that a lot of people do look at the reviews before deciding whether to buy a book. So I have read those. I had a blog tour where some people left some reviews, and I did read those, so I could thank them. So I suppose I have, but if I do get more widely known, I probably wouldn't, because I've been very fortunate. I've not had anybody say anything particularly negative. I've had some bit of constructive criticism, but nothing nasty. But if God forbid, people did start putting things like that, well, I would just think, no, I'm not going to read it. It's what really matters is the publisher, really, and people that are supporting me, I think. Because, I mean, to be honest, one book is not going to be liked by everybody. We've all got our preferences and different genres that we enjoy, and so there are going to be some people who would read that and think, well, it's not my cup of tea. Fair enough. That's, you pay your money, you take your choice, don't you? So it probably goes with the territory of being an author.
That's a good point. Jennifer Price said, what do you do to relax in between writing?
Read. Yes, read. I have all this time to. I've got a massive pile in my bedroom of books that I want to read. I also am a keen knitter. I do write quite a bit for a knitting magazine as well. I find that really relaxing, and it's quite trendy now to knit. It's all mindfulness and meditation. But I did it before then. However, I do agree that it's really relaxing, particularly if you're knitting something easy that you can knit whilst you're watching the telly or listening to the radio or something, so you're not really having to stress over the pattern. I really like the fact that you can see what you've achieved. You make something and it's there forever, a jumper, a scarf, a hat, or whatever. That so much in our world now is digital, that to actually have some object there in front of you that you've created, brilliant, love it.
There was another question from Anil. He says, do you have any writing routine that you follow?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What did Anil say?
He says, do you have any writing routine that you follow?
I wish I did. I ought to be a lot more strict with that. I know a lot of people, I've heard that a lot of authors will get up at the same time, sit at the desk, make sure they do so many thousand words a day. I don't. Sadly, I do have tiredness and pain with my condition, so I have to write around when I feel okay to do so, and that tends to be the evenings, actually. So I guess that's my routine. Writing in the evenings. I usually write in bed on my laptop, all nice and comfy, propped up with pillows, water next to me, some chocolate to keep my energy levels up. That's my excuse. Little and often, that's the best thing to do. I do find that if I haven't written for a few days, it's harder work to get back into it. But what I do think that what I do when that is the case is, if I actually go and look over what I've written already, do a bit of editing, that sparks some ideas in my head, and it starts to get easier again.
Well, Tamsin's smashing it with the questions. She's got another one that's really good.
Oh, thanks, Tamsin.
She said, if you were giving advice to other authors wanting to write a disabled character, what advice would you give them?
Do your research, certainly. Avoid tropes and stereotypes. There's so many of them about in the media. I just hold my head in my hands and, here we go again. So do your research, and remember, try and make the disability just one of the aspects of that character, not everything. It doesn't define everything in that person. I don't subscribe to the view that if you are not of a certain colour or gender or nationality or whatever, that you can't write a main character within that, with that characteristic. But I do think that you've got to be sensitive. So if you're not sure, talk to people who have that condition, see what their lives are like, ask them what their normal day is. You'll learn so much that you won't have thought of, and that can really, I think, make your book a lot more interesting and realistic.
That's really good advice. Thank you. Jennifer says, if you love historical novels, if you went back in time, what era would you have liked to live in?
Well, if I was fit and healthy, because if I lived in the past with this disability, I probably, I wouldn't be here. But I'm very much interested in the Tudor period and the Victorian period. I love Tudor history and all the Tudor monarchs, Anne Boleyn, the second wife of Henry VIII. I think all that was a fascinating time. And again, Victorian times. It's such a fascinating time, sort of 1850 onwards, when the British Empire, although obviously that was all wrong, it was coming into its peak, and the foundations of society as we know it now, what with its rails and electricity and all things like that, were coming together. Although, yes, it must be said that if I did to live in the past, I'd like to be at the top of the tree, please. I don't want to be the scullery maid, sort of having the miserable life, working 16 hours a day and dying of, I don't know, measles at 21. Thank you. No, I'd like to be the nobility.
Fair enough. I think that's a good answer for Jennifer. We've coming towards the end of our time now. So I'm going to ask you maybe like one more question, and then let you have a bit of a time to sort of tell us more about your book again.
Okay.
That's more of a plug. So, what were your plans? I know you had a virtual launch, but what were your plans if you had managed to have a launch outside of lockdown? What would you have done instead?
Well, it was going to be at Kenilworth Bookshop, and some family and wonderful old friends were going to travel from far and wide to come along, and hopefully there would have been chance for all the media to come, and I would have provided champagne and crisps and chocolate cake and all these lovely things. So I'm very determined to have another book published so I can finally have my lunch. Also, in about February time, before we knew lockdown was going to happen, I ordered a really nice dress off the internet. I thought, yes, going to treat myself, lovely dress to wear for the launch. And then I took it to the local adapter shop to just have a couple of tweaks done to it. And it's still there because lockdown happened and the shop shut and it hasn't reopened yet. So they've still got my dress. So I need to be able to wear it. I need an occasion. Yeah, second book launch. That's when it's going to happen.
Did you still have a little celebration at home when it came out?
Oh, well, a lovely friend sent me a congratulations card, and Red Door sent me a hamper of goodies. And then I was nervous on the day because I was doing the Facebook launch, but after that, my husband and I opened a bottle of champagne and shared it. And in fact, when I said goodbye to you all today, I've got a friend coming round and another bottle of wine is going to be opened. Bit of social distancing, wine drinking outside.
Oh, that sounds lovely. Right, so do you want to tell us the last bit? Give us a bit more information about The Perfect Sister.
Yes, My Perfect Sister. It's got twists and red herrings. It's got a satisfying ending, but I've left just enough open for you to wonder. And that's because particularly I like reading books where when you put it down, that sort of reader's journey isn't over. You sit and thinking, gosh, I wonder what they're doing now. Might there be a sequel? That sort of thing. I hope you enjoy it, and please do give me your feedback and do review it on Amazon and Goodreads if you get the chance. I hope that you'll enjoy reading about Annie and her development over the story, the way that she starts to see life differently, and please read it to find out whether she makes it to the end.
Would you write a sequel?
I think Annie's story is probably done, but I would like to write about Ian. I can imagine. I don't know if any of you have ever read Marion Keyes. It's not this genre, but she did a sequence of books about the same family, so about different sisters. And in one book about a sister, you'd get a little update of what's happening with a character that you'd got to know from a previous book. So I can see me doing a book with Ian and some sort of crime case that he's involved with, but just a little update in there of what's happening with Annie as well. But I've not plotted that out or anything. It's just, that's just the bare bones of the idea. I'm just waiting for inspiration about what the crime case could be.
Well, I'm sure all your readers will be glad to hear that you've got lots of other inspiration, though. There's more to come.
Thank you. Yeah, well, thank you ever so much for everybody who's been watching, for giving your time to me. And thank you ever so much, Caroline, to you and your colleagues in the UK Crime Book Club as well, for making this possible today and supporting authors. So it's much appreciated. Thank you.
And we'll drop some links into your book and to your website so that people can check you out as well.
That'd be brilliant.
Thank you.